Okay, hello and welcome to the weekly Wednesday night live stream. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that I try and do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you are new here, welcome. And if you are returning here, welcome. Let's see, before we get too far in, I just wanted to say if you wanted to be notified when I do go live, you can text the words Dana Live, all one word, to the number 22999. So I wanted to apologize. Last week, I wasn't able to do book club. I had some stuff come up, some personal stuff come up kind of at the last minute, and I just was feeling very overwhelmed. But we're going to do book club tomorrow night. So the book that we're going to be discussing is The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. I hope that you can join us. It's a short book. It's a fantastic book. I think there's a lot of nuggets of wisdom in this book. And also, the book that we'll be discussing at the end of this month, the last Thursday of this month at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, is the book by Marie Kondo, the magic, what is it? The Magic of Tidying Up, I think is what it's called. So I hope that you'll be able to join us for that. Um, let's see. Well, actually, let me jump into some questions. If you have a question that you would like answered on a future live stream, you can email me at deardana at what is it? Dear Dana at thriveafterabuse.com. And just make sure to let me know how you kind of what name that you would like for me to mention on the air. So, okay, let's see. Here is a question from last week. And we'll just say this is from Anonymous, who says, Dana, dear Dana, how can you show compassion or offer emotional growth when it starts to seem or you start to have doubts and wonder if you're enabling instead of helping? I have a friend who is stuck in victim mode. I can absolutely relate to what they're going through. However, I fear that by continuing to listen to them, I'm making things worse. So, this is a very real situation that I think a lot of us tend to find ourselves in, especially in um, kind of healing type communities like this, where there's where people have been victimized, right? Um, and in their attempts to move forward, everybody kind of moves forward at different at their own pace, and everybody's challenges are different. How they perceive them are different. There's lots of different factors at play, but it can be very challenging. I think a lot of survivors struggle with this at a certain place in their healing where uh, um, they're feeling a lot more empowered and kind of wanting to move forward, and they've made some friends along the way who are still very much stuck in this in their pain and in what happened to them. And this can feel and start to become very draining for the person um, who's not in that space and who doesn't want to give what happened to them a lot more time. So it's just a very real challenge. One of so here's some of my thoughts on this. So how do you offer compassion or emotional growth help when it starts to seem as though you're enabling instead of helping? Well, when people okay, so my 2 cents. When people are stuck in pain to such a level that they're continually kind of rehashing of what happened to them. They're, um, you can tell by having this conversation that there's a raw level of pain. They become very activated very quickly. They tend to kind of circle back around to to the different times that they were victimized or to this one particular event or whatnot. What I find that helps in that is to realize that when people continually bring up pain, it's because that those emotions behind that haven't been fully processed. And now that's not we can't process those emotions for them. And here's the thing. So with being I know a lot of people want to be like, well, I just need to kind of give them some tough love, or I need to pull them out of this, or I just need to kind of cut off these conversations. thinking that that'll help this person kind of get the motivation they need in order to get out of that quote unquote victim mode. That really doesn't tend to help. It tends to make them feel more isolated and or defensive. So what I think does help instead is to start doing a process of what's known as reflecting. So reflecting back their emotion. And I think a lot of us are familiar with the concept of reflecting in a negative sense of that it's manipulative or that it's kind of like this mirroring, it kind of mired in manipulation, and it's not. So when we're reflecting somebody's emotion behind what they're saying, it's helping them to have a place where they can explore the deeper emotion behind the event. So let's say, for example, they have a story. They were, um, I don't know, were in a car accident and they got to the hospital and the nurses were mean to them and the doctor didn't take their issue seriously, and then they had an abusive mom. Their mom came in and was also very dismissive, saying, "Oh, you need to just kind of suck it up, and you're not that you're fine. Shake it off." Kind of a thing. So they're telling you the story. Let's say they keep telling the story and they're very angry, they're very passionate about it. So they're telling you the story. Kind of this is, it's first there was A, then there was B, then there was C, then there was D. They're telling the story of it. So when we do that reflecting of emotion, it's taking it a level deeper. It's what is the emotion behind that. So saying something like, "Oh, it sounds like you're feeling really dismissed," or "It sounds like you're feeling really invalidated," or um, frustrated or angry, and helping them to put the emotion, to kind of, it helps to process the emotion by it helps them to identify the emotion behind the situation. So doing that can help, and it also takes the pressure off of you, and it shifts your interactions from just listening and just kind of being a place for them to kind of continually just tell their story, because nobody wants to just be dumped on all the time. Like that gets really heavy uh, really fast. So allowing them kind of listening to their story, but then reflecting back that emotion, it can be it's amazing, um, because people are like, "Oh, yeah, that is how I feel." Or, "Yeah, you're right, man, it really was so invalidating." Or, "Man, yeah, okay, yeah, I guess I am angry." And so kind of putting words to those feelings can help them move through it, and then it also takes the burden off of you of, um, of feeling like, "I don't know if this is a good thing, I'm just kind of sitting here letting them dump all over me." And it also kind of puts the ball back in their court. So you're reflecting that emotion back to them. You're also, and by doing so, you're releasing ownership of it. So what a lot of people struggle with, myself included, and this is just a shift from how I think many of us were raised or kind of indoctrinated, maybe is a better way to say it. When somebody's having a hard time, we all tend to kind of have this knee jerk reaction of we want them to feel better, right? It's kind of this, um, we see somebody suffering, we don't want them to suffer, especially if they're a friend. That's a beautiful thing, but it can be incredibly draining because then we might feel responsible for somehow making them feel differently than they are. And so realizing that we don't need to do that. Um, and plus by doing so, it can come across as invalidating and minimizing and dismissive. People feel how they feel, and that's okay. Um, and that we don't need to change that. With all that said, it's also okay and important to have boundaries around this. So if you have a friend who is really struggling and it's kind of the conversations have turned um, to a place where it's just draining for you, to be, it's okay to have boundaries around that and kind of anticipate. So if the conversation starts getting to this place where it's just kind of negative or heavy or draining, um, to d to somehow kind of tactfully switch gears and say something like, uh, "Wow, that sounds like really heavy stuff. Uh, that must be it sounds incredibly difficult to be in that situation or to continue to go through that. Um, but I was wondering if, uh, um, and I sometimes I'll just flat out say, you know what, kind of, but switching gears for a moment and then switching to a different topic. And you can even say, I don't want this to come across as like dismissive or anything. Um, I want to be fully present for you. Uh, um, but kind of switching gears, I wanted to talk about X, Y, and Z, or, um, you know, yeah, that kind of thing. Or just kind of knowing ahead of time, okay, if I get into a conversation with this person, it's going to go on for quite a while and it's going to be really heavy topics. So, kind of putting in some built in time around that. So, maybe if they call kind of right off the bat saying something like, oh, hi, I'm glad to hear from you. I would love to talk to you. Um, I only have about 10 minutes right now, but what's going on? How's your day? And then that way you're putting some boundaries around your time and your energy and your emotions. Okay. So let's see here. Let me scroll up. Okay, let me see. Okay, this is kind of a long question here. So settle in for a little bit. It says, "Hi, Dana. My question is around acceptance in dating. I've done a lot of healing work, and yet I do find some things that trigger my anxiety in dating. For example, I met someone and things were going really well the first couple weeks. One day we were talking about friends we have, and he mentioned this girl who was a very close friend. Now, I know it's not unheard of that a girl and a guy could be friends, but I've never heard of best friends. It just wasn't in my experience. So I felt it started to trigger my anxiety, and I started wondering if they'd ever dated before. I tried to ignore it, but it wasn't going away. I decided to be open and honest about the next time we got together and asked them if they'd ever dated. He said yes, and it was about 10 years ago that they had a bit of on and off and decided it would be better that they just stayed friends. The look on my face was horrified. I couldn't hide it. It was shocking to me, and things just went downhill from there. He asked me if I don't want to date him anymore, and I said, no, that's not the case. I just need to process this. So the following day, I decided to ask him questions. I asked him if he had feelings for her, if wait, if they had had a friends with benefits kind of thing, etc. He did a good job with addressing my concerns, but I still felt uneasy. It took me a few days to come to terms with it. My anxiety was running high. When I talked to him, I asked him questions like, do you even want a relationship? Do you have enough emotional bandwidth to be with someone? Ridiculous, I know. But I just couldn't understand how he could be his best friends with his ex. Also, he works a lot, and I mean a lot. He owns his own business and is working all the time. Again, I've never met someone who worked that much. So I didn't know when to text him because I didn't want to bother him. I asked him when would be a good time to text him, but literally, Dana, he is working always from the time he is up to the time he goes to sleep. I pulled away a bit and then he started to pull away. And although we were still texting each other, that spark seemed to be gone. We made plans to get together, but I went on a ski trip and we decided to go out after I came back. On the ski trip, I was drinking and texting him about the situation again. I noticed with my anxiety, I bring things up over and over when I don't feel things are sitting right. Recently, I'm going to highlight that part so we can come back to it. Okay. He said, recently, he texted me that he doesn't foresee a relationship coming out of this and that he underestimated the amount of work he has to do. It bothered me that he wouldn't even want to give it a chance to get to know each other. I started blaming myself that it was my anxiety that ruined it, that I had let it go or not even brought it up so many times or waited until we got to know each other better that things could have been different. I thought that perhaps I came across as critical or judgmental, so I decided to tell him over text it was my insecurities and if he would be interested in giving it another chance to at least get to know each other. He didn't respond, which I accept. My main question is I know I have anxiety and I'm working on it. I mean, I'm doing my honest best, but I'm afraid that I scare good people away. I accept, and let me highlight that as well. Okay. I accept myself and just want to be accepted how I am by someone else. But it ends up perpetuating the cycle of being rejected because insecurities of mine come up. I ask questions about things and I feel like it comes off as intrusive or critical. Then I think I'd be better to not date until I got my anxiety under control. But can't I be loved for who I am right now? It seems so easy for people to see things as a red flag and to not give someone a chance. I gave my ex a chance because he appeared to be genuinely trying. He ended up being a narcissist who tricked me. So it reinforces that I am not enough for someone to be my partner because I feel like I scare good guys away, and the ones who want to stay are abusers and people who want to use me. Self love is important, but trying to have a partner and being rejected over and over again flares up insecurities of why can't I be loved as I am? It's a cycle, and I'm not sure what to do. Thanks so much, Ava. Okay, there is quite a bit to unpack with this. Here's my thoughts that this guy, uh, I think it might help to think of him not so much in terms of like good guy or abusive guy, but more in terms of does this person have behavior that works for you or doesn't work for you? So you brought up two very valid things. He's best friends with his ex, and he has no time. So that's a problem, especially the time thing. It's Let's cover that first. He doesn't have time to be in a relationship, or I think the reality is he does have time. I think if we were to look at his phone and the amount of time that he spends surfing the internet every day, it would probably be a couple hours worth. So I don't buy that he doesn't have time to text. Um, I uh, because people make time for what's important. So the fact that he wasn't making an effort to respond to any text or whatever, that uh, not only, I mean, that in itself is a huge red flag, but we don't even need to figure out if he's, like how deep that red flag goes and what he's potentially up to. It's He's not at the end of the day, he wasn't making you or your relationship with him a priority. And that's not going to work. The only way that kind of situation would work is if you would just be comfortable having a relationship that's completely on his terms. And that's not going to work. Yeah. So you're going to feel very emotionally starved out like you were initially. So, yeah, concerning that he had no interest or desire to make um, this relationship a priority. So, that's a problem. The thing with his ex, um, yeah, again, can men and women be friends? Sure. However, I don't think it's so cut and dry. It's normal and reasonable and I think appropriate to have a little concern about, ooh, this is weird. This person, or this is unsettling. Let's put it that way. This is unsettling. This person is really good friends with their ex. I don't know if I'm okay with that. Well, the way that you do become potentially okay with that um, is to spend time around both of them. So, and most people that have opposite sex friends or friends with an ex or whatever it is understand this, and they're not. Um, uh, they go to lengths to make sure that their partner is okay with kind of these kind of unconventional or potentially um, uh, concerning relationship rocking, let's put them that way, relationship rocking situations. So, um, what I hear a lot of is people are like, "Oh yeah, my partner is really good friends with their ex, and I have all this anxiety about it. It's just my anxiety that's the problem." When in fact, it's like, "Well, no, actually, your partner is hiding their phone. They're going out with this person. They're avoiding introducing you. They don't want to spend time as a group. They're not doing anything to kind of include you in this friendship and to um, kind of reassure or yeah, kind of reassure any concerns that you might have. So I wouldn't be okay with that either for whatever, if that counts for anything. So, and it's not just the fact that they were really good friends with their ex, it was the fact that this person doesn't seem to be making a relationship with me a priority. And, um, there seems to be no interest in including me in that. I would have a real problem with that. So, and here's the thing too, at the end of the day, there's lots of people out there that who just would not be okay with their whoever they're dating staying in contact with, let alone being best friends with an ex. And that's okay too. This isn't about judgment. It's not about any of that. It's kind of what is okay with you? Like kind of where are your lines with that? So, okay, you mentioned the comment. You said, I notice with my anxiety that I bring things up over and over when I don't feel things are sitting right. Yes, absolutely. And this is actually a good thing. So, it's not that old issues come up, it's that unresolved issues come up. And so if you can see, kind of tune into that, it th- that's more of a in these kinds of situations when an issue we can't seem to resolve it, especially with the information that you've given here, it's because you didn't have enough information or reassurance to resolve it. So you're just kind of having to make peace with the fact of, okay, well, I guess he's just going to be best friends with his ex. And I guess I'm just going to have to accept that. And I think anybody would have a very hard time just kind of accepting that and then just moving on. Because I think it'd be normal for that to kind of swirl around in your head and want to know more. So yeah, these kinds of conversations, when you find yourself rehashing conversations, thinking about something over and over again, having multiple dreams, having concerns like this, it's because there's unanswered questions. And that anxiety, especially in this kind of a situation, it's appropriately placed. So it's not just anxiety for the sake of anxiety. It's you're having a very normal response to some questionable behavior. So, okay. Let's see. The other thing that you brought up is okay, and we kind of touched on this in the beginning. You said, I'm afraid that I scare good people away. And so I think kind of the way out of that bear trap of thinking is realizing that people is not dividing people into like good and bad, but dividing people's behavior into what is workable for you and what is not workable for you. And this is where it comes down to like boundary standards and deal breakers. So it's not that just the bad people of the world are abusive. There's there's lots of quote unquote good people out there who you will not be compatible in a relationship with for a wide variety of reasons. So they can be perfectly quote unquote good, but they're still not right for you for any number of reasons. And yeah, it can get very old and exhausting and feeling very defeating if we're continuing to date. And it's that those feelings of kind of rejection and false starts and everything that goes along with it. But unfortunately, in large part, that's kind of what dating is. So, um, yeah, out of everything that you've said, the only added, I don't think the issue here is your insecurities, frankly. Um, yes, there was a couple comments that you made that were passive aggressive. Let me see if I can find them. Something about, oh, you don't have the emotional bandwidth to be in a relationship. Oh, do you even want a relationship? These kinds of things. Those comments sound to me, and you're not just pulling them out of thin air, right? It sounds like those were coming from that place of frustration and anger of you can't contact this guy ever because he just says he's way too busy to to communicate. Well, that doesn't work. So my, I guess the kind of the last piece of advice, I would give you with this is realizing that your concerns about this, your frustrations about this, especially, well, but with both issues, are very valid. And um and I would encourage you next time with the next relationship that you get in when you're dating to realize if something's not okay with you, then it's not okay with you. And it's worth asserting yourself about, because kind of making your line in the sand between what is, again, getting away from, oh, is this a good person, a good guy or a bad guy kind of thing, to, is this relationship, is this nourishing or is it draining? And if there's, and of course, it's probably going to be a little bit of both at times, but the things that don't sit right with you, the things that you don't have peace about, the things that are causing you perpetual confusion, crazy making, aggravation, frustration, these kinds of things, all of that needs to be addressed and resolved in some way, shape, or form, because the solution isn't for you just to get better at uh, tolerating real relationship concerns. The issue is for you to realize, okay, hey, this is what I need in a relationship. I want somebody that has the time and who's willing to put in the time to actually being in a relationship. I want to be able to text or talk to a significant other um, every day, whatever it might be for you, every day, twice a day, um, some sort of ongoing communication. I would like to have dates and spend quality time with them. If they have, I'd like to get to know their friends, especially if they have opposite sex friends or friends with exes. And I'd like for them to have the communication skills where if, obviously this goes both ways, right? Where if, I have some concerns, that they make those concerns a priority and that they're willing and able to have those uncomfortable conversations that are going to arise. So, yeah. Um, okay, let's see. Let me scroll down. I'm going to kind of shorten this one up. This is from Artesia, who mentioned that she was in therapy with a therapist. And here's kind of what she has to say. She says, my therapist mirrored every gesture, activity, language, and accomplishments. She said there were just a lot of lies. My therapist crossed every boundary, and I would get really upset. I began doubting myself and um, kind of felt like nobody would believe me. And frankly, I just don't want to go to therapy anymore. So, even though this wasn't so much of a question, I wanted to bring this up and address this in the sense of therapy. In order for a therapeutic relationship to work, there has to be that level of open, honest, sincere communication between both people. And now, granted, I don't know, it doesn't sound like that would have solved or would have really necessarily helped in this situation. There are absolutely um, really deeply problematic people in all walks of life, in all professions, you name it. And it's really unfortunate and terrifying that a person can be a therapist um, and have so much problematic behavior, and that it's coming out on their client, and they're um, kind of doing whatever, but crossing boundaries and this kind of stuff. If you are, if you have a therapist, because, and we've talked about this a little bit, kind of the difference between the right therapist and then the right enough therapist. Because whenever there's two people in a relationship of any kind, boundaries will eventually be crossed, even if a person has the best of intentions. And I think the potential for boundaries being crossed in therapy is incredibly high, because it's very difficult to kind of know. um, it's like it can feel like walking through a minefield, and you don't know where somebody's like activating, where somebody's triggers are, until you kind of stumble across it. And then you see them react. And so that can be, but if there's no conversation around that had, or if the client is perceiving something in a very hurtful, or if they're feeling dismissed or um, invalidated, or boundaries crossed right and left, like these kinds of things, that really needs to be addressed. The right enough therapist is going to be respectful about having these conversations, and they're going to provide a safe place for assertive communication and having those kinds of conversations. So, versus the right therapist, who is kind of this mythical creature who handles every single situation with every single client perfectly every single time. And that doesn't exist. And, um, you know, so again, not this situation. It sounds extreme, and it sounds like this therapist was deeply problematic. And I guess kind of the reason I was um, kind of giving more of like a broad brush answer on that is I think a lot of people struggle with getting into therapy, and there are times where they feel re-victimized, or um, um, they have concerns with how the session went, but they don't share those with their therapist, and so this therapist may never know that they crossed a line or that the client perceived things in a certain way. So just for those that are in therapy, that's kind of how you know when you have a right enough therapist, is that you feel heard, you feel like you're in a safe place, you feel um, that your therapist is there to help you heal. Okay, so there was one other question from Joe, and I'm not sure if I saw Joe in the chat, and I'm not even sure if it's the same Joe, but um, Joe, I will email you my response to your question, because it was kind of deeply personal, and I don't want to, um, I don't know, to make things awkward for you. So, okay, so let me hop in the chat here. Okay, there's a question from Amy. Okay, she says, how do I handle my narcissistic ex being married after our breakup? I don't know, but all his family and friends are 100% pro marriage for him and the new girl when they used to love me. I just feel so replaced. Help. It hurts how quickly they move on. I mean, did I mean nothing to him? And when, yeah, so I guess there's a couple things here with that. When somebody moves on very quickly, it's a reflection. It's not a reflection of you, it's a reflection of them. It's a reflection that they didn't have those deep emotional connection. They didn't have that deep emotional connection to in your relationship, or to the relationship, or to you, that you had for them. And it can be it's heartbreaking. And when we have this realization of, oh my gosh, somebody can kind of be um, can really kind of act the part, or um, yeah, they move on at light speed, and they just don't look back. But I would strongly encourage you to not internalize that. Don't make that about you, that there's something wrong with you. Realize that there was no deep emotional connection on his end. And if he has a pattern of that, I don't know what else your relationship was full of, but people, and here's the thing, not everybody has the same level, desire or ability to connect in a relationship. There's a whole kind of um, theory or practice in psychotherapy that's known as attachment theory. And it can be very eye-opening to realize that there's some people that are more on the avoidant side of the spectrum, um, that there is no depth of the connection there. So And it's heartbreaking and it can be incredibly confusing because they can say all the right things, they can do all the right things, and then boom, you're like, oh my gosh, okay, last week you were wanting to work it out. You wanted to go to therapy. You were promising me the sun and the moon and all of these things, telling me how much I matter to you. And now it's, fast forward 3 weeks and now you're dating somebody new or now you're engaged. Like, what on earth? So, um, yeah, it's incredibly painful, but, um, yeah, it's not you, it's the other person's level of attachment. And here's the thing too, and I can imagine it's that added challenge of if his family used to absolutely love you and, they were very quick to kind of bring you into the fold, and then all of a sudden you're out and this new woman is in, that's kind of that double level of rejection, right? Um, and it can also be very confusing and whatnot, but realize that he has his own spin on events. And so he's and here's the things, everybody does. So everybody's got their own version of what happened. However, with deeply dysfunctional people, their version of what happened, their version of reality is oftentimes incredibly skewed. So who knows what he's telling his family? Uh, and that more than likely is a large part as to why they were so quick to kind of drop you and then move on to her. So again, this is not a reflection of you, it's a reflection of them and kind of what they've been told and kind of the level of either intentional or unintentional manipulation that they got kind of tangled up in. So moving forward, it's your healing is going to be about kind of giving yourself that time and space to nurse those wounds. It's real. That kind of level of pain of just being tossed away like that it's crushing. So I hope that you're able to really triple up on your self-care during this time because it's important. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Okay, Amy says, "Oh, thank you for your wise words. I would feel so much better if his marriage fails, which will mean he was really toxic. He seems too nice to the new girl, and I just feel like I was toxic." Valid point. And so let's cover that real quick. What you're seeing, well, first off, kind of what you're seeing secondhand, probably through social media and whatnot, that's a very scripted reality. A. And then B, if it's this new girl, what you're also seeing is what's known as like the honeymoon stage in a relationship. We all go through this with every relationship. It's this idealized, it's the rose-colored glasses stage of a relationship. It's exciting. People, everybody's focused on the things that they have in common. This other person seems so ideal. They seem so amazing. Things are fun. There's kind of this, you're exploring the other person. It's exciting. Um, it's that thrilling, um, kind of dopamine high of the beginning of a relationship, but it's not real. It's just infatuation. And the relationships don't start to even get real until that infatuation stage wears off and is replaced with negotiation. And that negotiation stage of a relationship, that's when we start seeing the other person for who they really are. I think the best example of this is if you've ever, I don't know how old you are, but um, if you, I guess if you've ever seen the MTV show The Real World, this was a great example of this. It was probably the first reality show on TV now that I think about it. And their whole premise was they would have, I think, like six strangers, very different backgrounds, live together in a house, and then they would film it. And the whole concept of the show, like the tagline of the show was kind of what happens when people stop being polite and they start being real. Like this is the real world. And that's it in a nutshell. So that idealized stage, it's when people are being polite. We're being considerate. We're kind of There's a lot of oftentimes like ingratiating behavior. We're tolerating things we might not otherwise tolerate. People are trying their best to kind of get along and find common ground and these kinds of things. When that ends, when people settle in, when there's that degree of comfort there, that's when disagreements start coming up. And disagreements tend to be more of sticking points, whereas early on, we might kind of gloss over them. But then later, it's sort of like, oh, I didn't realize that you had that belief. And oh, that's kind of a concern. The kind of mirage, the illusion of this perfect dynamic or ideal dynamic with this other person starts to have cracks in it. And then a relationship starts to become more real when those differences are able to be um, discussed and negotiated. So okay. So here's the thing too. So when it comes to, and I absolutely understand 100% the idea of I want his relationship to fail because then I'll have that confirmation that he was the toxic one, that it wasn't me, that it was in fact him. But the reality is we don't know how toxic she is, or let's say dysfunctional she is. So if he's got all kinds of dysfunctional behavior, if she has the same or even more dysfunctional behavior, uh, that relationship might keep going on and on and on. But remember, just because a relationship continues doesn't mean that it's nourishing or fulfilling or anything. Toxic relationships can go on for decades. So just because it lasts isn't proof of anything. So I guess just kind of know that the behavior that you saw from your ex, his way of handling frustration, anger, stress, his ability to um, uh, boundaries, how he handled or responded to like your boundaries, your standards, your deal breakers, uncomfortable conversations, or you having differences of opinion, all of these things. If people bring their coping skills from a relationship to relationship, right? We all do. We all do. We all handle situations in the best way that we know how until we learn how to do something different. So I guess kind of knowing that how he was handling situations in your relationship, if he would shut down communication, if it was silent treatment, if it was he was berating you, it was yelling, it was cheating, it was this, it was that, it was the other thing. There is uh he's going to continue that kind of behavior in future relationships. People don't just magically do a 180. That's his way of handling things. So if his way of handling things is maladaptive, then that in itself is problematic. That's not going to go away with switching of a partner. That's only going to go away once he learns but not even that he learns, that he comes to terms, some sort of acceptance that he has problems with how he handles things, and in a deep, consistent, ongoing level of motivation to do something different, which is going to mean learning new skills and then practicing those new skills. So I hope that kind of shines some light on that. Um, okay, Roberta asks, is there an intersection between narcissistic personality disorder and bipolar? What would this combination look like? There can be. Frankly, I would say the intersection between NPD and bipolar, or even sometimes NPD and schizophrenia, I think the overlapping commonality is grandiosity. So um, that is the only one that comes to mind at this moment. I'd have to think about this a little bit longer, but that's the main one that I've seen time and again. Uh, And keep in mind too that a person can have both a personality disorder and a mental illness. So this is where it can be challenging to kind of parse out what is what. And of course you have bipolar 1 and then you have bipolar 2. Uh, bipolar, it's a mood disorder, whereas NPD is a personality disorder. The difference is moods, there's the fluctuation, there's the highs and lows. With bipolar 1, there's more of um, there's more extremes, oftentimes requiring hospitalization. It oftentimes goes hand in hand with like delusions and psychosis and um, more extremes. Bipolar 2, and again, not to minimize that, because the highs and lows with bipolar 2 are just as awful. It's just awful in kind of a different way. But there's kind of that hypomania, and then there's the crashing, the depression. Um, NPD, you don't have you don't have that. Although the grandiosity can be confusing. Um, but with NPD, there's more. Each diagnosis has its own set of criteria. So with a personality disorder, personality disorders differ from other types of disorders in that personality disorders, it's behavior that's pervasive and persistent, or often referred to as like rigid and persistent. And it's across um, it's kind of across all areas, and it's outside the realm of what would be considered normal for that person's age or culture, or uh, yeah, kind of age or culture. So um, personality disorders, by and large, the needle doesn't move very far with medication. If a person is struggling with bipolar, medication the right medication, I should say, can make an ocean of difference. But even that said, what comes to mind, there was uh, a guy I worked with many years ago who um, uh, had schizophrenia, and and he was very grandiose, and he was medicated. And so I don't think this was his personality. But it was delusional too. So even if a person's on the right medication, his medication helped him live as functional of a life as he could. Um, there was still that level of major grandiosity and just delusions. Thinking that he had been an engineer and a doctor and a famous baseball player and kind of this and that, and all of this just not rooted in reality at all. So NPD, it tends to be kind of that lack of empathy, that lack of remorse. It's kind of this blinding degree of selfishness, uh, a high level of defensiveness, kind of the inability to be sincerely accountable. Um, you see a lot of like deflection and denial and minimization. It's uh, kind of ideas that kind of what sounds like a haughty attitude, kind of a holier than thou type attitude. Uh, just narcissism it's on a scale, so it can be a little difficult to to kind of see it for what it is. Um, so it's challenging. Some degrees of narcissism can really fly under the radar for kind of quite a while. And it also depends on that person's level of insight and emotional maturity. So sometimes a person can have that complete lack of accountability, that lack of empathy, that lack of remorse, that um, that level of defensiveness, that inability to take criticism, even no matter how constructive, uh, just kind of thinking that they're always right and everybody else is always wrong. Uh, um, but sometimes if they have like a higher degree of emotional awareness and insight, that they can kind of say all of the right things or enough of the right things that creates a lot of confusion. Um, so kind of like the Bill Cosbys of the world, it'd probably be a good example of that. they can come across as one thing, but then kind of when nobody's looking or behind closed doors, they're very, very different. It's malicious, it's intentional, it's destructive. So, okay. Um, Monica says, my ex was my friend for 6 years. Once we got together, which I never expected would happen, I discovered who he truly was, and I had to grieve the loss of what I thought was a friendship and a lover. Yes, and you bring up a really great point. And I like how you worded that because yes, it's exactly that. It's grieving the loss of kind of what you thought you had. Like you thought you had this friendship and you thought you had this lover and this relationship, but you didn't. And I think it can help to realize, to kind of reframe our grief that way of, okay, I'm grieving the person that I thought I was in a relationship with. I'm grieving for the relationship that I thought I had. And if they were incredibly manipulative, uh, and all, you kind of saw like the charm and a lot of like the quote unquote good things, and they kept all of the bad things hidden, then it can be incredibly confusing. And yeah, but I think it is helpful to kind of parse that out and realize, okay, yeah, I got to grieve what I thought I had and realize it was all smoke and mirrors and it wasn't real. And of course you feel sad, right? Like I think anybody would have missed, um, I told myself that all the time with my ex. Like I felt so almost guilty, like wrong or bad for having those moments of missing him or missing what we had. And then I realized, I'm like, Dana, of course you do. Like he pretended to be this really awesome guy. And anybody would miss that person because he was awesome, but that's not who he really was. And so if anybody went around acting the part of like this awesome person, like yeah, other people are gonna, they're gonna like that. So yeah, it can take a while to kind of wrap your mind around everything and to to heal from that level of betrayal. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Um, Amy says, I am 30. I know MTV is real world. Haha. Yeah. Yeah. It was a great show. It really summed up that transition. Well, I love that they had it on film, you know, that kind of when the niceness, big people began to settle in and started becoming real. It's cool. Oh, okay. So changing my life. Oh, I guess Embers was saying something. I'd made the comment about a bear trap, in terms of looking for a person, like a good person. And Embers, or changing my life, was trying to elaborate on that, saying, yeah, kind of feeling like we won't find somebody who's good enough, or finding the right person won't fall for me. Yeah, that's pretty much what I was trying to say. That when we have very kind of all or nothing thinking, like I want to attract a good person, or why do good people keep leaving, or why do I keep running off good people, this kind of a thing. If we're looking at people in terms of like good person, bad person, we're missing all of the nuances that show themselves in that gray area. And so I was trying to make the point of shifting, viewing them like a good person versus an abusive person or a bad person, in terms of behavior that is kind of nourishing for you or behavior that's draining for you. And um while that first question I asked, or the last question I asked, w- while this guy had was different from her ex, that doesn't mean that he didn't have problematic behavior. So she had some issues with things that he was doing. And um, I don't know, it sounded like she brought up kind of in a roundabout way about his one friend, but um, there was no resolution. And so she was trying to convince herself that that was somehow okay, that that she was never going to hear from him because he was just too busy. He just worked, 20 hours a day, and uh, that he was basically lying because people are on their phone, people do text, people make time for what's a priority for them. He just wasn't making his relationship or time with her a priority. And he was trying to justify that maybe in his own mind, saying that he was incredibly busy, and she was trying to accept that justification. But deep down, she's like, no, this is not okay with me. I want a relationship where the other person actually wants to make time for me and for us. So, yeah. Okay. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. Mhm. Okay, so it sounds like Kayla and Keep Your Distance, Please are both in the same boat here. The issue is, how do you deal with the narcissist and the legal process? How can I heal after so much damage and lies? Now, in terms of a narcissist and the legal process, keeping a paper trail is very helpful. So any communication that you have with them, getting it through email, getting it through text, you really want to avoid phone conversations or conversations, in the hallway, like these kinds of things. You want to make sure that there's other people, at a minimum, other people, uh, well, ideally in writing, but if not, then having other people around that can witness, um, you know, the conversation. So getting everything in writing. When you're dealing with a narcissist in particular, it's not only do they have this degree of like pathological selfishness, it's they also tend to rewrite reality. And because they feel entitled and they feel justified, and any boundary that anybody sets, anything that in any way that they're inconvenienced, they feel like that's abusive to them because they lack accountability. So I guess kind of knowing that. So kind of prepare yourself for a lot of insensitive, ridiculous, outrageous, jaw dropping behavior on their end because of that. Uh, in terms of how do you heal after so much damage and lies, I think it helps to view healing in terms of healing isn't about going back to the way we were. I think that's a really important point. A lot of people, myself included, for many years, get stuck there, thinking, okay, well, I'm not healed because I'm not the way that I used to be. But the reality is, life is always about moving forward. It's never about moving backwards. And so, if we can kind of release this idea of that, oh, to be healed means to be who I was before this relationship, that won't happen because it's not meant to happen because life doesn't work that way. And it's not just with that relationship, it's with any of your experiences. We're always going to be changed in some sort of way based off of the experiences that we have. With that said, where our power comes into play is that in large part we can decide how we are changed by these experiences. That's incredibly powerful, and that might seem, I don't know, that might not land, uh, that might seem really painful or dismissive or even re-victimizing to hear that at this point if you're still so raw with pain, but I think it's important to have that be said, to realize that we can decide how we're gonna be changed by this. So I think it was Maya Angelou who said something along the lines of, um, kind of, "We can be changed by our experiences, but we don't have to be reduced by them." And that's very true. So finding ways that you can take what happened to you and use it for your highest and greatest good. And then in time, use it for the highest and greatest good of others. So, what this might look like is you go through a relationship with a narcissist, you basically see the kind of the worst traits that a human being could possess. And so using that towards your highest and greatest good is realizing, okay, you know what? I just got confirmation of the kind of parent I don't want to be, or the kind of friend I don't want to be. So I experienced maybe cold, cruel, calloused behavior. Okay. Uh, because I know what it feels like to be on the receiving end of that, moving forward with my child or with other people, um, I see the value, really see the value in being caring and compassionate. And of course, within limits, right? Like within boundaries. I'm not saying kind of be this emotional, sponge for other people, or sinking yourself, kind of a codependent type thing, but just realizing, okay, yeah, um, I realize the pain that can come from insincere behavior or lies. And so because of that, I really am going to work on bringing um, kind of honesty and assertiveness into all of my relationships. Uh, being on the receiving end of cheating, I realize how profoundly damaging and painful that is, and making that commitment to yourself, like, I'm never going to do that to somebody else. I'm not going to cheat on somebody else. Um, so these kinds of things, and yes, kind of making that declaration of like, I am not going to let this ruin my life. I am not, and I'm going to figure out a way to grow from this. But it's, I forget who said it, but somebody's like, you can either go through something or you can grow through it. And making that decision of, okay, I'm going to grow through this. There's uh, it feel it kind of gives your pain a purpose, and it helps you to rediscover your power in that. So I hope that helps. Okay, let me scroll down here. Serenity says, okay, so what are some signs? I don't want to deal with a narcissist ever again. It's so damaging. I have PTSD because of that. And it's hard to be around people or even be in the grocery store for too long without stressing out. Okay. So I'm trying to think of how to answer. I'm sorry, guys. It's been kind of a long day. I'm trying to think of how to answer this. So I did a whole video series on red flags, and part of me, in some ways, really regrets that, because while it can be eye-opening of, oh, this is a problem, I found that it created a bunch more confusion that I did not intend. So here's the thing with that kind of looking out for red flags and whatnot. It's less about red flags. It's less about spotting, okay, well, this person's really grandiose, or this person has a pattern of cheating, or this person, I don't know, talks all about themselves, or this person, seems to lie a lot. It's less about kind of looking at things on an individual red flag level. It's more about, and I know this might sound really strange, but just hear me out. It's more about turning inwards and realizing and getting clear with what is and isn't okay for you. So when we do that, that's when our other relationships start to work. So if you know, um, so okay, back to the question that I was asked, where the gal, I don't know if you were here for that, the gal had said she had been dating this guy, and he was best friends with an ex-girlfriend. Well, okay, if we were to look at that, in kind of a one at a time kind of thing. We could say, oh, you know what? Huge red flag. They're friends with their exes. Okay, well, that might it can create some clarity, but the bigger thing there is the fact that it wasn't so much that he was friends with his ex, because some people are truly just friends with opposite sex people, and they're just friends, or they're friends with an ex and they're just friends. The bigger thing there is figuring out what what are you comfortable with and what are you not comfortable with. So if you're not comfortable with that situation, with a person that you're dating being best friends with their ex, um, is it just you don't want to do that? You don't want to be friends with somebody who's best friends with their ex? That's okay. That's your boundary. Or if it's not necessarily that, if it's, you know what, I don't know. I don't know if I can trust that. Well, then maybe the part of that information gathering phase is to spend more time with them as a couple, as a group, where you guys are all going out, you're getting to know them, you're able to watch them, and you can tell if somebody has feelings for them. If someone in there has feelings, either they have feelings for their ex, the ex has feelings for them, or whatnot. And if you're not okay with that, if you voice those concerns, how does that person handle it? So if you have boundaries with kind of behavior of, you know what, I am not going to tolerate, uh, I'm not going to tolerate certain things. Like I'm not going to tolerate being yelled at or put down or, um, I don't know, pushed into having sex or um, belittled or, uh, kind of these different things. Like these are certain things that are just going to be deal breakers, like physical abuse, deal breaker, sexual abuse, deal breaker. Um, if they, uh, I know I mean, my life radically changed when I tightened up my boundaries to be like, I don't do situations, relationships, friendships, whatever, that cause perpetual confusion, ongoing mental anguish. So if the situations can't be resolved, then that in itself is a problem. I don't need to wait for concrete proof that there's more there, that that person is in fact cheating, or that they are a pathological liar, or that they are a narcissist, or that they are stealing from me, or whatever it might be. I don't need to wait for that concrete proof. It's concrete proof enough that it's that this situation or this relationship is full of um, conversations that don't go anywhere. It's full of perpetual confusion. It's full of mental anguish. It's full of it just that's not that's not conducive to my personal growth as a human being. So I don't do that anymore. And at first, when I began making that shift, I had a lot of anxiety. Again, kind of back to that letter with a gal who was dating, of thinking like, oh, well, I don't want to miss out on a good person. Well, what if my boundaries are too strict? What if I'm not being reasonable? I mean, like nobody's perfect, right? This is where we go back to the difference between um, uh, kind of looking for like that good enough partner. Like, are we looking for perfection? Absolutely not. But it's important that a person has the skills, has relationship skills, if we're going to try to be in a relationship with them, and vice versa. So if either one of us don't have the skills to be in a relationship, that relationship's not going to be functional. It's going to be profoundly dysfunctional. And so those relationship skills, it's going to be open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication. It's going to be treating the other person with dignity and respect, especially when both of you are frustrated, or either one of you are frustrated or angry or stressed out. It's the ability to communicate your wants and needs assertively and directly and um, tactfully. So focusing more on that. If you get really grounded in that, then everything else falls into place and takes care of itself. And kind of um, the problematic, the deeply abusive people of the world, the trash will take out itself. Because if you have got those boundaries in place, we're like, you know what, I'm not going to tolerate this certain kind of behavior. If they blow up at you, for whatever reason, they're belittling, they're berating, they're degrading, they're uh, insulting, they're throwing an adult version of a temper tantrum, they become physically abusive, they become intimidating, this kind of thing. Um, Realizing it's okay to have deal breakers and you don't need to try to work everything out, and not everything is workable. And oftentimes, well, especially with people like that have deeply dysfunctional behavior, the issue isn't communication. They know what they're doing, they don't care. They know that they're being intimidating. That's the point. They know that they're being verbally abusive. That's their intention. Their intention is to get their way and to push other people around into giving them their way. They just don't care because they feel entitled and justified to act that way. But what's important for you is to realize that um, you don't need to be on the receiving end of that. That stuff is a bunch of nonsense. And you don't need to be on the receiving end of it. You can get up and walk away. And your life will start to change once you start to do exactly that. Okay. Inspector for you asks, what if you're still in danger, stalking, and you have a young child? This has been going on for 8 years now. Well, outside of moving, probably, frankly, I would say getting as much distance as you can tends to help tremendously, because it makes it more inconvenient for them. It kind of helps. It can help to um, kind of break up that obsessiveness with them. Whereas, if it's in-person stalking, if they get drunk, if they're bored, if they're feeling any kind of way, and their outlet is to then drive past your house, drive past your place of work, these kinds of things. Putting some distance can help with that. If you do decide to move, I strongly encourage you um, to spend some time looking into how to do things as anonymous as possible. So changing your phone number, changing, if you get an address, not sharing your physical address with anybody, because it will be on the internet. So getting a post office box, um, and not even giving your address, if you can avoid it, just not even giving your address to friends or family. They can send mail to other places. If people are going to come over to visit, I would make sure that they're not, that they realize the severity of your situation, that they're not trying to kind of walk the middle line between being, friends with both of you, kind of a thing. Uh, Outside of that, in the meantime, I would have a camera. I'd have front and rear cameras on your car if you have one. And I'd have cameras outside of your house, front yard, backyard, side. I would take that stuff very seriously. Same, I would take screenshots of stuff if it's online stalking as well, and potentially moving forward with legal action. Okay. So let me see. Let me scroll up here. Oh, actually, let me scroll down. uh, okay. AB says, I cannot get over the fact that my mom gave me a black eye because she caught me trying to kill myself and I didn't tell anyone I was being abused. How do I get over this? It sounds like there is a lot there. I would encourage you to, I would say, therapy. Therapy, finding a therapist that you feel safe with um, kind of exploring all of the emotions surrounding that and helping you to process them. Most domestic violence agencies offer free counseling, free therapy. So that might be a good place to start. So since you've experienced abuse from your mom, generally you would be eligible for that. So I would consider calling your local domestic violence agency, seeing if they have a counselor on staff, letting them know this is kind of the situation that you're really struggling with moving forward after this, and if their services, if they have services that you can be a part of, and if not, if they have any recommendations. So it's because, well, and I guess to kind of um, just address the surface of that, it's the fact, when you said it's the fact that my mom gave me a black eye because she caught me trying to kill myself. It sounds to me like it's more of uh, that it was your mom's reaction, right? So it was the kind of the invalidation and anger that um, that you were that was being directed towards you when you were at probably one of your most vulnerable times, right? And so if there's ever a time that a person needs kind of to be shown that they matter, that there's love and support and acceptance, and um, you know it's when they're actively suicidal. And so the fact that you didn't get that you got even more abuse, more dismissiveness, um, more of that. Yeah, absolutely. How profoundly hurtful that must have been. Absolutely. So moving forward in that and kind of quote unquote getting over this, in part, it's, I think, realizing that it's very understandable that you are, are so emotionally hurt from that. It can also help to realize, if your mom, I would imagine, has had an ongoing pattern of abusive behavior, that um, that her, again, her behavior, it's a reflection of her. It's not a reflection of you. So this is how she has this pattern of handling frustration, stress, anger, uh, issues that she's not okay with. If that's her pattern of handling things, that she lashes out and becomes physically violent, that what you're seeing there is that those are her limitations. That was her best way of handling that situation at the time. And her best way of handling it was kind of woefully inadequate, right? It's not even in the zip code of what you or anybody would have needed in that kind of a situation. So maybe kind of reframing it to yourself of, you really, if there was any doubt in your mind before, like, it's crystal clear now that these are her limitations. And um grieving the loss, and too, with moving forward from that, grieving the loss, this is a very real thing when children have parents that are abusive. Even when I say children with abusive parents, it's even adult children. I mean, you could be 60 years old and your mom is 80. There's still this uh, grief process that happens of realizing that you didn't get the mom that you needed or that you wanted. And that is really a profoundly painful realization to come to. And it's often accompanied by a lot of denial and minimization and rationalization, and then eventually tears of, yeah, you know what? I really wished I'd gotten a mom who was loving and supportive and who would listen. And what I needed at that time is I needed a hug. And instead I got a black eye and I got shamed for it. And she just cannot be that emotional support that I need. And frankly, it's heartbreaking for you to be on the receiving end of that, but it's also tragic for her because she's missing out. She's missing out on having um, a beautiful relationship with her daughter, and that's sad. And so, um, and there might even kind of come a time where you um, kind of have some pity on her because of that. That's just sad, because it is, like, really seeing other people's limitations of, wow, this is it. This is their highest and best when it comes to interacting with other people or being there for their children. And boy, is it not even close to what anybody needs. And that's just sad. What a sad, lonely um, existence to not have a real relationship with your kids. She's missing out. Another thing that you can do is um, this can be a really interesting exercise. Oh, I guess let me just. I want to make sure I'm understanding the situation correctly too. Just for clarity's sake, it sounds like you're saying okay, maybe I need to scroll up. It sounds like this happened a while ago. I guess I just want to make sure that this did happen a while ago and that you're feeling safe now. That's the most important thing. So, okay. Yes. Okay, sounds like it's been a while. So one of the things that you can do, and anybody can kind of take this same kind of example. It's very interesting. So those parts of us where we feel stuck in that emotional pain. Again, your mom handled the situation wildly inappropriately. It, there's I really can't think of other ways that it could have been handled worse than it was. So I think it kind of acknowledging that, validating yourself of her response was outrageously inappropriate on many different levels, and it was not what you needed at all. And then getting clear on, okay, what did you need at that time? And having the more of like a adaptive adult in you, the one that realizes that was not okay. Like, I cannot believe she did that. And I realizing that you are worth being treated with dignity and respect and care and compassion. Absolutely. 100%. Not something that you need to earn. It's just the basics of appropriate human behavior, especially when you're hurting. So I think realizing that, um, so taking that mature self, that healthy self, and then going back mentally to that time, to that night when this event happened, and going up to your former self, and it's kind of like this kind of reparenting type thing where you're becoming the adult in that situation. You go up to your younger self and you be what you needed at that time. So maybe you're visualizing your younger self sitting on the bed, and um, your mom just leaving the room, she's still yelling at you, you've got a black eye, your adult self kind of kneeling down, looking at you eye to eye, and just saying, sweetheart, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. You didn't deserve that. And my heart breaks for you that you were feeling like the only way out was to end your life. Like, you matter so much and you're so important. And I just think you're so neat in so many ways. And I'm just so sorry that your mom couldn't be there in the ways that you needed her to be. And then visualize giving yourself a really big hug. So, how does that, how does doing that exercise feel? Okay. She says, yeah, I'm crying now. It's really powerful when we realize that as an adult, that you can give yourself all of the love and care and compassion that you never received as a child. And that, thank goodness, that we don't have to rely on kind of these other adults in our life that let us down. That we can now, as because you're an adult now, that you can get these needs met, that you can meet your own needs, that you can keep yourself safe, that you can validate yourself, that you can create a safe space for you. She says, yeah, it feels like a release. Oh, wonderful. Good. 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 Well, hugs to you. Hugs to you. That's a lot to go through. And yeah. And I hope that you're able to move forward and to find a good therapist at a local domestic violence shelter. There's a lot of healing that can come from, um, I think, just having another person kind of witness, just pay witness, just be there, witness those feelings that I think so many of us have gone through life feeling like we needed to carry them alone. And that's the thing with grief and with hurt like that, is it doesn't just go away on its own. Time softens pain, but it doesn't. There's that healing process that still needs to happen. And um, yeah, allowing yourself, realizing that all of your feelings are valid surrounding that, and you probably have a lot of different feelings about it, that they're all valid. And ideally finding a good enough therapist who is going to be able to just listen while you share your experience, and to help you understand what you're feeling, and to help you move through those feelings as they surface. And it'll surface kind of like waves. They come and they go. Some waves are larger than others, but with time, it no longer feels like you're kind of lost at sea in the dark, in a storm. There gets to a place where kind of the sun comes out again, and you're like in the shallow wind, and the waves that come are more surfable, and that you're able to manage them. You're able to see them coming, and you're able to manage them as they do ebb and flow. Oh, you're so welcome, sweetie. She says, I am overcome with emotion. Thank you. Thank you. Mm, yeah, you are so very welcome. So very welcome. And thank you to everybody in the chat who is just keeping this place supportive and validating for A and B. It's such a gift that you guys are able, that we're all able to give to each other, and that the chat, everybody in the chat is able to be. It's nice to have kind of a safe enough corner of the internet. Um, let's see here. Let's scroll up. Jennifer is saying, um, she says, even though my dad sexually abused me for so long, it's extra confusing because he wouldn't just put food on the table and a roof over my head and clothes on my back, but he would also do my hair, take me to ballet class, give me self-help books because he could see my low self-esteem. He also took me in because my bipolar mom was neglecting me and my sister. And so it's so very hard to hate him, but he sexually abused me. So I'm supposed to hate him. this absolutely sounds like a very confusing situation. I think a lot of people struggle with this in these relationships that aren't um, that don't feel like 100% um, abusive 100% of the time. Although I would say Jack and the moderator is making some really great points about a lot of that behavior is grooming behavior. And so we can look at it through the lens of it is abusive. And probably a big part of why he was kind of doing so much had a lot, it wasn't so much of him being a good father, it was more about him kind of releasing himself of his guilt by trying to prove to himself, hey, I'm a good person. So there's that. But then there's also the um, when there is so much pain in a relationship, we can also get back into that kind of all or nothing thinking. And um, kind of the opposite of idealization is demonization. And this again, and this can be very confusing. This thought uh, of oh well, this person had some both, like they did some things regardless of their motivation or intention, if it was grooming behavior or not. There were some good times there, right? But then there were also some profoundly horrific times there. And so then trying to kind of reconcile these two in your mind of who was my father and how do I feel about him, it can be very difficult. And one of the things that can help with that is realize that these both were occurring at the same time. That yes, you had that um, he did there were things that he did that were uh, kind of some of the high points of your childhood, going to ballet class and doing your hair and given self-help books, and that he had some concerns about you. And so those, as a child, you're like, okay, yeah, these were some good times, but then the bad times were really bad. And I think working through all of the emotions that surround that can be a very lengthy process. Uh, and the reality is, you said I'm supposed to hate him. The reality is, you're only supposed to feel how you feel. So you don't you don't have to feel any way that you don't feel. And it sounds like you feel conflicted. It sounds like you feel hurt. It sounds like you feel betrayed. It sounds like you feel confused. It sounds like you feel, if we were to probably dive deeper into it, uh, um, I'm sure that if we were to dive a little deeper into it, there's probably anger there, that his actions stole a lot of your childhood and stole a lot of innocence. Uh, that there's in the kind of the taking you in because your mom was neglectful. There's probably a sense of relief. There's probably a sense of gratitude. So there's that whole wide range of emotions. And because relationships are complicated, and because of that, we have kind of a wide mix of emotions surrounding them, and you feel how you feel. So if you don't hate him, you're not supposed to feel any other way than how you feel. So you don't need to hate him. You can feel how you feel. You have, and like we've talked about this before, you have really good boundaries around your relationship with him, um, and kind of keeping yourself safe, and knowing what that feels like to keep yourself safe now, emotionally safe, and keeping being assertive and keeping some distance from other people that um, kind of don't honor that. So uh, feel how, you're going to feel how you feel, but at the end of the day, it's going to be keeping yourself safe. That's a big part of it. And so I'm glad that you're able to do that. Uh, so I guess that's huge, and I hope that you can see that um, as a sign of your own personal strength and how far you've come, because it's not easy to be able to have that wide mix of feelings, especially if hate and anger aren't necessarily there, or if that anger has been really repressed for a long time. It's difficult to be grounded enough in keeping distance from hurtful people. Um, so the fact that you are able to be grounded in your boundary is huge. So yay you for that. Yeah. AB says, yeah. At the time she said, I needed a hug. I needed a mom. Yeah. And so allowing yourself to just give your younger self a big hug and be like, you know what? And you can even have that dialogue, talking to yourself, say, you know what, kiddo, you didn't get the mom that you wanted or needed or deserved, but I can still be good for I can be good. I can be good to us now. I love you. I'm there for you. Hmm. Okay, let's see. Dora asked Dana, does a narcissist know that they have a label, or is denial how they do what they do? Okay, so here's the thing with that. So a lot of the time, it's going to depend on their own level of insight and their own level of, I think, entitlement and justification and defensiveness and emotional maturity, and you name it. For kind of the more stereotypical narcissists, you I mean, a guy, it runs the gamut. You could call a narcissist, you could say, oh, you know what? Here is the DSM and here's the criteria, and this is you. Like, you are a narcissist. A stereotypical narcissist might have the reaction of, no, I'm not. You're wrong. You don't know anything. I'm, what kind of crackpot therapist are you? I know more than you, right? Like, I know more. I know the most, kind of a thing. It's just this arrogant, haughty, defensive attitude. They might be really resistant to that. I don't have any issues. Don't you see all of my behavior is because of everybody else? And that's where that level of entitlement comes into play. Um, it's for abusive people. Well, look at what you made me do, right? You forgot to buy milk at the store. That's why I shoved you. That's why I screamed at you. That's why I, acted in this outrageous way. Or let's say if they did blackmailing, kind of and they justify every single thing that they do. So it's, oh yeah, well, I blackmailed this person. I wasn't blackmailing them. I was just being responsible. Like, I was just, kind of making sure that, I had my ducks in a row, kind of a thing. But really, that's maybe not even the best example. That's more of a political example. Cheating, oh, I cheated. These are the reasons I cheated. This person, they threw themselves at me, or you weren't putting out enough, or on and on. They always have justification because there's no sincere accountability for their actions. So it's always everybody else's fault. It's never their own. That is the stereotypical response. Um, for a narcissist that has a very low degree of insight and a very low degree of emotional intelligence. If you get a narcissist in there who has a higher degree, okay, let's say then you get one that has a higher degree of insight but still has that low degree of emotional intelligence. They um, uh, they might even come in saying, oh, you know what, I'm concerned, I think I might be a narcissist. And or let's say they get diagnosed as being a narcissist, right? Um, but they have that low, so then they might embrace that label, or accept it. They might be like, okay, yeah, this is probably true. Um, but if they have that low degree of emotional intelligence, then they're using that label as an excuse for everything that they're doing. Sort of like, well, I just do this because I'm a narcissist. I just do this because I'm a sociopath, kind of a thing. It's like, no, it doesn't. Like, you're still responsible for your behavior. So that they know the difference between right and wrong. They don't. They're so selfish that they're focused on getting their wants and needs met, oftentimes at the expense of others. But they know that that's a problem. There's just not a lot of motivation for them to do otherwise. So then let's say you get a narcissist, who's probably going to be on the sociopathic side of the spectrum, but a narcissist who has a a a higher degree of emotional intelligence. So let's say they get diagnosed as a narcissist or antisocial, uh, and um, they they just don't care, or they might, or actually better is that they say everything that they feel that you want them to say. That's what I see. That's what I've seen a lot of over the years is uh, um, kind of just manipulative. Like, it's that insincere manipulative behavior, kind of just saying everything that the thing is, if you're kind of wise to it, not all the time, but a lot of the time, you can see right through that. It's very, but of course, they don't realize that other people can see through it. And most probably realistically, probably most people can't see through it because they're not dealing with that kind of stuff on a regular basis. Um, so they know what they've done is wrong. They've justified it in their mind. They really don't care. They're trying to get out of consequences. So they're saying whatever they feel like they need to say in order to avoid consequences. There isn't any sincere remorse present. Probably a great example of this is police interrogation videos, where the police know exactly what's going on, that this person, they have a lot more information that they're letting on, and they're just kind of allowing this person to keep lying to them, either because they're trying to get a confession, or they're just uh, yeah, generally because they're trying to get a confession. So they're going through that whole process of kind of good cop, bad cop, or leading this person down a path. And frankly, then interestingly enough, maybe even this might even be off topic, but one of the techniques that they do with police interrogation, it's that giving that person an out. So allowing them to save face and maintain that kind of ego integrity, while then so basically offering up a potential reason as to why they murdered somebody. Of, oh, you were jealous, gosh, anybody would be jealous in this situation. And um, I think you're a great person, and this is very clear, and look at all these other the great things that you've done. And so they're kind of allowing this person to save face. I don't know. I don't know, that's a long rambling answer. But I guess at the end of the day, here's the thing: with the vast majority of people with problematic behavior, narcissistic or sociopathic behavior, giving them a label, frankly, does more damage than it does good, because then they tend to wear that label. It's the label becomes another excuse. Well, I can't help myself because of this. Mental health in general, this is a very common thing for people, and it's a fine line, right? It's a fine line between um, uh, kind of having a diagnosis and then like becoming the diagnosis. It's a challenge, but with people with that kind of behavior, um, yeah, I I don't think giving them a formal diagnosis, it just, especially if they're looking for one, like if they're looking for a diagnosis, then that tends to not provide the clarity that they're looking for. And I would really question the, the professional integrity and like motivation for a therapist to or a psychiatrist to diagnose somebody with something. with if they're looking for a diagnosis of like with frankly with anything, but especially with antisocial or narcissism, there tends to be like secondary gain there. Like there's a reason that they're looking for that diagnosis, and it's not good. So, you know, I don't know if that makes any sense or helps at all. Oh, okay. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. Ember says, yes, my abusive, sociopathic, narcissistic ex would say to me, said to me, I used to be a narcissist, but now I'm an empath. A few months later, he threatened my life and ran for good, and I ran for good. Yeah, good for you for getting out of there. Here's my take on this. The hair on the back of my neck tends to stand up when red flags are raised and people talk when they say I'm an empath. And the reason why is because when well, for starters, empathy is a trait that we all have to some degree, right? The, where it concerns me is and of course some people are more empathic than others. I completely understand that. Uh, what concerns me though is when people tend to say, "Oh yes, I'm an empath." What they're more often than not doing is that they're deeply in tune in a almost like in a projection sense. They're deeply in tune with the pain of other people, but it has more to do with their projecting their own stuff into the pain of other people. I see that like 99 out of 100 times. And then the downside of that is, and the great irony is that they're really not in tune with that other person's pain because they're kind of re-experiencing their own pain. So it's kind of like a weird form of narcissism in that sense. And of course it's well intended, right? It's coming from a good place, but it tends to be it's their own unprocessed stuff, and it's also a sign of really poor boundaries. So if we're picking up all of this emotional or even physical stuff from other people, then and that's a boundary issue on our end. So um I guess I'm just very like when people say, oh yeah, I'm an empath, what I tend to hear when they say that is um I don't seek any type of verification for how you're feeling because I already know how you're feeling. And that's a problem, right? Because and that leaves a lot of room to misread the other person's experience because those questions to it, it it falls more on that spectrum of assuming. So if I just somehow, oh, if I'm just an empath, I just know how other people feel, well then I'm not going to be asking the questions to make sure that I'm not kind of transferring my own stuff or projecting my own stuff onto them. If I already feel like if I just already know how they feel or what they think or whatever, it just leaves all kinds of room for not seeing the situation clearly. And um, and that's a problem. And it's a sign of poor boundaries. And it's um, generally, I would say it's going to be a sign of issues to come in the relationship because of it. So, and I know that's not probably a popular opinion. And this is and you've probably heard me talk about this. I have struggled with this too. So it's, um, kind of in terms of that level of like hyper empathy. When I was a nurse, when I first started my whole journey with all of this, I remember going through like clinical rotations and going into the kind of, you do like this medical surgical rotation where every person has different issues. Okay. So you don't ever really know what you're walking into. One person, I don't know, they have a kidney issue. The next person, I don't know, was in an accident and has broken bones and some sort of other issue and so on. And I would leave at the end of, at the end of our, um, what's the word? The end of our like clinical experience that day, and my whole body would just hurt, and I was completely exhausted, and I didn't realize why for like until like years after that that's what it was. Is because it was a boundary issue. I was very hyper in tune with the kind of pain of other people to the point where I was taking it on myself, and it was causing me all kinds of issues. So having to kind of back up and what would be the word? Not be so enmeshed of okay, letting other people have their stuff is their stuff, my stuff is my stuff, and then being aware of when am I picking up stuff that's not mine. And it's still an ongoing struggle. But I think back to there were times in um, when I first heard that word empath, which was probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, and thinking like, oh my gosh, I really feel like that's me. Because I care so deeply, and I have this like hyper level of empathy and all of this. But then I realized, oh my God, with great horror, realized, oh my gosh, I think what's been going on is while I really do sincerely care, I've also been um, unintentionally minimizing and misreading a lot of situations because I thought that I understood the situation more than I actually did. And so when I realized that, it was, uh, you have to kind of do kind of a reshuffling of how you approach things. Lisa says narcissists always know what I think or feel. It's never accurate. He's always disappointed or skeptical when I feel quite happy and away from him. He needs me to feel horrible, just like him. Yeah, and that's actually a sign of verbal and emotional abuse. So when somebody is saying, it's that defining behavior of, oh, you're telling another person, this is what you think and this is what you feel. And the reason that's so problematic is because we're not experiencing that person's inner experience. A person's thoughts and feelings are their own stuff. We might have assumptions, we might have um, ideas, and we might even be pretty accurate quite a bit of the time. But at the end of the day, we don't know for sure. And it's so easy to inadvertently project or transfer our stuff onto another person and take that as reality of, oh, I know exactly what you're thinking. You're thinking, um, you're thinking that I'm stupid, or you're thinking that outfit looks terrible on me, or this, that, and the other. And it's kind of it's just this weird form of projection. Like we're putting our own feelings about things onto another person and then taking that as truth. And it's easy for any of us to do if we're not aware that that's a thing that we do. So like just kind of knowing that, then it can be helpful to see it. So okay, let me scroll up here. Um, okay, scrolling. Yeah, Jack mentioned to another member in the chat, hey, are you subscribed to Dana's texting service? She sends out texts when she's about to go live. Yes, for those of you that haven't subscribed, and if you're interested in it, it's free. And so you can get notified when I go live. You can by texting the words Dana live to the number 22999, and Dana live, all one word. And then also, I'm doing another thing where if you would like some words of encouragement, you can text, again, all one word, I thrive, to the number 22999, and then you'll get, oh, I don't know. I send out probably, it depends. It depends how much coffee I've had, really, and how motivated, how much energy I have. It's anywhere from like 3 to 4 messages a week that I send out that are just, um, yeah, just words of encouragement. So, one of the things too, oh, okay. Jack says Kayla's question. Mm. Says, okay, any thoughts for somebody who has been shunned from their community due to a successful smear campaign? They are true, genuine friends believing lies. It is a major loss. That is so profoundly difficult. I think your best bet, if they were true, genuine, true, genuine friends, is to have uh, to send them a message and to be very tactful uh, and kind of open up that conversation of, I know that you've heard a lot of things. Let's just say from a person named John. I don't know. John said, "I'll." I've heard from other people that John has said all kinds of things. I just want you to know that that uh, quite a few of these things are not, I don't know if they're not true or if it's just half the story or what, but maybe a lot of these things are taken out of context. A lot of these things aren't even true. And um, I can absolutely understand why you would want nothing to do with me. I wouldn't want anything to do with somebody if I had heard everything that you've been hearing. So, but I just want you to know I did value our friendship tremendously, and it just breaks my heart that we can't we can't talk about this because it's just not true. And he has spun things and taken them out of context or kind of given half truths or total lies. And, um, so I'm reaching out to you, and I guess with the hopes that we could, have an honest conversation surrounding all of this. And if you don't want to be my friend, then I understand that, and um, I'm fine with letting go. But I feel like if you don't want to be my friend, I just want it to be because of things that actually happened. Or if you don't want to be my friend, it's because of things that I've actually done, instead of that you don't want to be friends with me because of lies or of half truths. And um, yeah, and kind of leaving it like that. So kind of giving them some more context, because if a person's never experienced that level of kind of manipulation or just half truths, then of course they're going to just take it all as a full truth and be horrified of, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you would up and leave your kids, and that you wouldn't, that you would do this, and that da, 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 da. When the reality is, okay, well, maybe this person was incredibly threatening, and um, that there's more to the story that completely and dramatically changes the context of it. And, so that's kind of really all we can do. And sometimes, there is going to be a fallout. That's the thing. When you've got a pathological person who who has rewritten reality to make themselves the victim of the situation, and who is intent on demonizing you, then um, there's going to be fallout to that, because most normal, decent people don't even realize that uh, they get caught up in that insistence and that conviction that a narcissist can speak with. Because most of us are like, you know what, I'm a pretty good judge of when somebody's telling the truth and when they're lying. But when somebody has rewritten reality and they feel completely justified and entitled, that's when it's difficult to tell if somebody's lying. It comes across as the truth because they're so fired up about it. And um, I forget, somebody made a great comment a while back about there's that difference between uh, uh, guiltlessness and shamelessness. And so that's why we so easily misread that. So we're misreading what we're seeing as shamelessness, because they feel justified and entitled, but really, um, um, actually, what we think we're seeing is guiltlessness, that they must be innocent, that they must be telling the truth. But really, what we're seeing is shamelessness because they're feeling justified and entitled. So, and then they're changing up details or omitting important details that would, dramatically change everything. So sometimes there's going to be that fallout, and sometimes moving forward involves kind of mourning the loss of friends, and um, and moving forward into making some new ones. And it's incredibly difficult. So, but sometimes it's necessary. AB says, why do I hate the beginning stages of a relationship? Why do they cause so much stress? Well, that's a good question. Um, my guess would be it has a lot to do with past experiences and perhaps concern over the progression of that relationship. So I think you'd mentioned in a previous live stream that that your relationships tend to um, be full of a lot of um, kind of have very emotional endings, right? Like that you tend to kind of um, pull, you date somebody, like you kind of pull them in and then everything's fine. And then you kind of do this turn, or then you become very punishing, very, uh, you kind of push them away. And my guess is, especially if they're kind of decent, nice people, um, and you're not really aware of why you're doing what you're doing and pushing them away. There might be some guilt there that you're doing that. There might be some shame there. There might be just the feeling of, God, every relationship I've been in up to this point has been nothing but it's been fun for the first couple of weeks, but then it's just been really dramatic and chaotic and stressful and time consuming and a big headache. And so maybe that's why you kind of dread the beginning of a relationship. It's not so much the beginning, it's you're dreading, where it's going to be, where it's going to go. And yeah, so I don't know, how does that sound? Does that resonate with you at all, or okay? Let's see, let me scroll up. Reading here. Oh, completely switching gears. I had mentioned before I completely forget, I'd mentioned in a previous live stream, somebody was asking me what my personality type was, Myers-Briggs personality style. And so there is a free test over on a website called 16 Personalities. It's interesting, where you can take the test and then they'll email you with results. So my personality style is INFP-A. So that is a mix of introverted. So introverted is at 78%, intuitive 77%, feeling 74%, prospecting 61%, and assertive at 57%. And my role is, according to them, is diplomat, and my strategy is confident individualism. So I thought that was interesting. And uh, yeah, there's tons of information. So then they have uh, the I was confused by the prospecting thing, like what exactly that was. but it's kind of the desire to figure things out as they go. And a prospecting person is, because like, I was like, what is prospecting? Like, are you looking for gold? Like, well, I'm very confused. Um, it means you're much more flexible when it comes to dealing with unexpected challenges, versus the opposite of that would be the J, which is the judging personality, which is more rigid and kind of goal oriented. They prefer a plan rather than going with the flow. So, yeah, interesting stuff. If you get a chance, I think the website's just 16 personalities.com. Jennifer says, I thought you were an INFP, Dana. I did too. I thought I thought that I was. And then I took this test. I don't know. It's been a while, maybe 6 or so months ago, maybe less, 4 months. I have no concept of time. It was a few months ago. And I, in my mind, that's how I remembered it. But yeah, no, I was wrong. It is INFP A. So, yeah. Oh, no, you were right. I need to get that. I keep thinking I was INFJ. I'm not INFP. Jennifer says, "Oh, I thought you were an INFP." Okay, so you got it right. I was wrong on a couple different levels. So, yeah, interesting. I don't know enough about the different personality traits. I had an acquaintance of mine who was huge into Myers-Briggs personality types. He really felt like it just clarified everything. So, and I really value his insight into things, because he was spot on with so many things. So I guess kind of knowing that, it's worth diving into and exploring some more. Um, let's see. Fatima, hello, asks, any good tips or channels that may be helpful with ADD? I tried the How to ADD, and unfortunately, it didn't work for me. Is there anything that you're looking for in particular? And I guess, what was it about that channel that didn't work for you? Because yeah, I guess that would help. Okay, let me scroll down. Oh, Jennifer says, we're close. I am an INTP. Interesting. Jack says, "Aw, but the narc abuse recovery community already has tons of INFJs. Come back to INFP." Oh, that's funny. That would make sense. Thomas is saying the INFJ is rare. Yeah. Uh, I, I would think so. And of course, this is just based on my very limited knowledge of this. But I guess, kind of saying this out loud, the the traits of intuitive and kind of judgmental, or like plan oriented, again, based on my 2 cents of this all, seem to be kind of opposites, or they don't really go together that well. So and part of me wonders if, because if there are so many people kind of in this trauma community that are the INFJ, that have that quote unquote judgmental trait, which is more of that, I need structure, I need routine, I need um, you know that which God, I would love to have more of that in my personality for sure. But I almost wonder if that that personality trait is coming from a place of because of trauma. So if there's that need of routine, of structure, predictability, safety, and if that's why. And then I also kind of wonder if I had taken this excuse me, taken this test, 10 years ago, like what would the results have been then? It's interesting. Uh, uh, let's see here. I'm scrolling. Okay, so Fatima says, I'm having trouble focusing and staying on task. Even when I get rid of distractions, I find something to distract me. I worry I'll screw up my future because of this. So, kind of the added challenge in your situation, Fatima, is mm, a history of, especially a history of trauma, but trauma in general can cause kind of that overactive fight or flight system, and that leads to scatteredness. It leads to avoidance, which comes across as exactly what you're talking about: trouble focusing, trouble staying on task. That we're just in this like fight or flight state. So because you have that history of trauma, um, I, mm, I would encourage you, kind of as you move forward in your healing journey, to to spend some time on healing from that trauma. My guess is um, if you were to work on it solely as, okay, these are just ADD things, then that's going to be more of like that top down approach. Whereas I think kind of lasting change is going to be that bottom up approach, which is going to be addressing that trauma. So a lot of that's going to be um, um, different types of like somatic therapies. EMDR is probably going to be really helpful for that. Um, Learning, kind of learning to create your own safe space within your body and then within your external environment. If we're still in a situation that's incredibly activating and unpredictable, we're still going to be in that fight or flight state. So there's only kind of so much uh, yeah, it's gonna be hard to kind of be calm and focused and directed if you're continually activated. So my guess is that it's more of the anxiety that's going on. It's not so much necessarily like ADD type stuff. Not to say that a person can't have both, because you absolutely can, but it can be challenging to kind of sort out like, well, what is what here? Because it's very common for people that have experienced a lot of trauma, a lot of abuse, especially ongoing, that they have a hard time just being still. They have a hard time sitting down and focusing, because once they they are still, then kind of there's intrusive thoughts, there's um, that energy just kind of builds up, and then they feel the need, like, I've got to do something, I've got to kind of discharge this energy. So yeah, it's kind of some challenges there. um Also, it can be helpful to try to notice if there's themes in your behavior. So this is, again, this is kind of more of like maybe a top-down strategy, but are there certain things that you tend to avoid or procrastinate, which is really avoidance? But are there certain things that you find yourself avoiding? So kind of being able to view your behavior and see like, okay, what's going on here? Like, are there repeating themes between certain things? Oh, okay. Jennifer says, if you want a good book on Myers-Briggs, you should read that 16 Personalities. It's by AJ Drenth on Kindle. Okay. I will take you up on that. Let me copy that. Okay, let's see here. Let me scroll. Gloria's Happy New Life says, I'm drinking Egyptian licorice tea. Oh, I need to order some. I am out. Yes. Well, I hope that I hope that you're enjoying it and enjoy it enough for the both of us, because it's been a long time since I've had some, and it's so good. Okay, let's see. L. Okay, says, well, actually, real quick, S. Ray says, I'm grieving my abusive marriage. I recently walked away from it, 2 months, no contact. But I'm also dreading in 6 months I can file for divorce, but it just seems cruel to have papers mailed. Any advice? I guess my thoughts on that is um, that I don't think personally, I don't think it's cruel at all. Most people, even if the divorce is amicable and they're on good terms, papers are mailed. So it's, and especially in a situation where the other person's been abusive, that's something where it's a boundary that you need to have that distance in order to keep yourself safe. And because people that are abusive, when they have moments like this, they can become very unhinged and very unpredictable, and they can lash out. And at a minimum, it would probably be on the receiving end of a lot of verbal and emotional abuse, and it might even escalate to physical abuse. So you, as a boundary, it might feel cruel, but it's having that boundary, keeping that physical distance from a person who has shown um, that they have kind of boundaryless behavior is the appropriate thing to do, because you've got to keep yourself safe. So I know under in this kind of um, re-navigating boundaries in general is going to be part of moving forward in your healing and from this relationship, and then realizing that uh, it is reasonable and appropriate and healthy to have boundaries. So if somebody's been hurtful to you, it's that we need to interact with that other person based on their treatment of us, not based on how we feel. So we might feel, oh, this is cruel, or oh, I miss him so much, or oh, I love this person. If they have been hurtful or abusive in any way, then that needs to be the North Star for how we interact with them. So we have to interact with them based off of their destructive behavior, not our feelings about them. When we get in trouble, it's when we are letting our feelings override their bad behavior, thinking, oh, but I know this person's incredibly abusive, but I miss them, or I love them, or we were married, kind of nostalgia kicks in, or it might be feelings of, oh, well, I should do this, right? Like we were married for 10, 20, 50 years. I feel like I somehow owe this to them to do this. And the reality is, no, you don't ever owe anybody to, no situation ever warrants you putting yourself in harm's way, either verbally, emotionally, financially, sexually, physically, you name it. So, um, yeah, it's not cruel. It's not cruel to have papers mailed to him. It's cruel for him to have been abusive. And your response to his behavior is exactly that. So, these are the consequences. When a person's abusive, we have to keep our distance. So, you having boundaries with him, it's not to punish him, it's to protect you. And of course, he won't understand that. And probably a lot of people in uh, around you won't understand that. But um, but that's okay. You don't need them to. Your life is not a democracy, and you thankfully, right? So you don't need other people to vote on how you should handle things. Your guiding light needs to be kind of what is nourishing for you, what it keeps you safe and sane. So, okay. Oh, good. She says, S. Ray says, yes, I'm 40 and I've never had boundaries. And I just wanted to thank you for your work and your wisdom. You're helping me see things how they should be. Yes. Well, welcome, my dear, to the next chapter in your life. And I am very excited for you because it's going to be game changing, absolutely game changing. And if you keep going down this path of tuning into, what is nourishing for you, what is draining for you, your boundaries, developing functional and healthy boundary standards and deal breakers, you will, and it's going to be awkward because it's learning something new, and that awkwardness lessens with time and practice. But there will come a time where you're going to look back at now, frankly, especially now or even a year or two ago, before, all of the time it took you to build up the strength to actually get a divorce. And you're going to think to yourself, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I did anything other than have boundaries and be assertive. And I will never be treated like that again. So, yay, you. Yay, you. Okay, let's see here. Huh. Gareth says the sound is not as good tonight as in the past. He says, I'm having issues hearing what is said. I wonder if that's a me. I might not be talking very loud. I'll move my microphone closer. We'll see if that makes a difference. Fatima saying, okay, I asked her what were there themes in her behavior? And she said, I avoid things I find not fun. Like I know schoolwork is important, but when I go to do something I like, I feel a release. Yes. So one of the things, there's a couple of things that you can do that can help with this. And again, honestly, if it's coming from ADD or if it's coming from trauma or a little bit of both, it doesn't really matter. These strategies kind of work the same. Um, and I am a big fan of timers. So and here's the thing too, keeping something in front of you, like in sight. I know we all have timers on our phone. Alexa has timers that we can say, but it can really help to get like an egg timer or something that it's just on your desk and you just manually turn it. Um, it might sound silly, but it makes a difference. You're going to be more inclined to use it if it's right in front of you because it's that visual reminder of, oh yeah, there's the timer and I can use this. So relying, kind of setting your environment up to contribute to your success is important. And that's one of the things that you can do that helps. So setting a timer in for 10 minutes tends to be kind of, I think almost like a magic number, especially for people that with ADD. Um, 10 minutes, it is amazing what you can get done in 10 minutes. And not only that, but it it helps to battle that overwhelm, because when things start to build up, it it can start feeling monumental. Like, oh my God, and we can develop, and people with ADD already struggle with time blindness, but we can kind of, to add to that, we can really be off track. We can think, oh yeah, this is going to take me, uh, um, I don't know, I've got this paper I've got to do for school, and that's going to take me 5 hours. But then in reality, it might not take anywhere near that long. So that's where kind of having a timer comes into play. And then you'll experience that relief of, okay, I made headway on this. Because, and as you know, that constant thinking about, oh, I should be doing this, I should be doing this, like I've got to remember to do this, like, I've got to deal with this, da, 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 da. All of that is so draining. It's just so mentally and emotionally exhausting when we put things off. But it really does help to just set a timer. You don't have to complete the whole thing. That's not even the goal of this. It's just to be like, I'm just going to touch it and just get some momentum in that direction. And then that, uh, doing that, it kind of tiptoes around that, kind of fight or flight center, that amygdala part of our brain, because it's sort of like saying, nope, nope, no worries, nothing to see here. We're not going to take on this whole project. It's not going to be this like massive undertaking. Don't worry, don't stress. We're just it's just 10 minutes, total nothing. It's just a nothing burger. 10 minutes, easy peasy. That's it. You'll be shocked. So if you can just start doing that one thing, uh, then it also, that you'll see a huge improvement with that. And then it also, there can, depending on the task, it can almost become, and I know this is going to sound really twisted, but it almost becomes kind of fun, because then it's like playing beat the clock. Then you're like, okay, well, how much can I get done in 10 minutes? When you really start to have that momentum, it's, uh, yeah, it's wild. It's truly wild, the dent that you can make in something in 10 minutes. And there's, you can always keep, you can do little sprints throughout the day too. You don't have to just do 10 minutes a day. If you're really enjoying it, you can be like, okay, clean the bathroom, 10 minutes, boom. Or you could have it, the goal be, okay, I'm going to do 6 10-minute sprints in whatever things throughout the day. So sometimes it's just starting. That's the biggest thing. And sometimes you don't even necessarily need to start with the thing that you're most avoiding, although that is helpful and that builds even more momentum. But if the resistance is that great, sometimes setting the timer and doing something that you are more inclined to do. Send 10 minutes, you're going to organize, I don't know, your desktop, or you're going to organize your closet, or you're going to, whatever it might be, just start. And then you can transfer that level of momentum on to the next thing. It's really difficult going from kind of that cold start where like you're not doing anything, to jumping into kind of the deep end with something. So just start with um, yeah, just start in some direction and then go from there and see where that leads you. Okay, let's see. Kayla, I that is a great question, and I hope that people have some information here in the chat. She says, "Does anyone have any resources, support groups, apps, books, especially YouTube channels, you name it, for recovering from eating disorders? Is there any eating disorder in particular that you're looking for resources around. And um, I was going to ask another part of that question and I just completely lost it. Oh, and then what kind of yeah, I guess kind of, are you looking for people's like personal journeys, or like what kind of support are you looking for in that, or information are you looking for? Oh, Kayla says, I just bought an egg timer without knowing why. Now I know. LOL. Yeah. Well, good. I hope that you enjoy that little beat the clock kind of game. It is fun. um Gareth says, I cleaned out my whole flat tonight and it really lifted my mood. I feel like a different person. No exaggeration. Yes. Yes, absolutely. It really does. The book that we're going to be covering for this month's book club, which will be the last Thursday of this month, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, is what is it? The Magic of Tidying Up. It's the Marie Kondo book about organizing. And uh, I just finished the book today, and she's so cute. I just love her. But she brought up a really great point in her book about exactly that, how kind of cleaning and organizing it's this energetic, um, it kind of moves things around. And one of the comments that she makes in the book is that she's had clients whose skin has cleared up, um, that have lost weight, that their health has changed. And she's like, I know that sounds so wild to say. She's like, but it's true. And it makes complete sense to me, because there is that stagnation that we have in an environment where there's a bunch of stuff, um, a bunch of stuff, especially if it's not organized or no longer needed or necessary, or if it's negatively emotionally charged. All of that stuff is impacting us day in and day out. It's building resentment and anger and frustration and irritation. All of that's growing. And those emotions, if we're not aware that we're feeling this way, um, you know, it just, we tend to internalize that on levels that we might not even be aware of. And then it comes out in all kinds of weird ways: headaches and skin conditions and insomnia or hypersomnia, or um, allergies or asthma, or all kinds of things. Super interesting. So yeah, so yay you for clearing out your space. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry to put you on the spot like that, Kayla. I didn't even think about that. Um, oh gosh, yeah, yikes. I'm sorry. She says, oof, vulnerability. She says, I'm looking for help with bulimia specifically. Okay. She says, I'm looking to begin recovery. I'm struggling to even make the initial decision to break the habit. Although I argue with myself over it every day. I'm eager, but I'm stuck. I guess let's put that out to the group. Does anybody have any recommendations, any resources that you've come across for bulimia? Let me make a note to myself. I can do some digging too. Okay. Oh, okay. Elle, yes. Okay. I think she's going to resend. I'm sorry about that. I was going to read it and then I got distracted. Um, okay. And while she's posting that, Necessary Truths asks, is ADD or ADHD a symptom of NPD abuse, or are the symptoms the same and misdiagnosed? Thank you. It can be um, ADD and ADHD. There's a lot of overlap with the experiences of trauma. There's troubles with attention. There's hyperactivity. It's again, it's that kind of fight or flight activity, kind of this overstimulated um, kind of nervous system in part. And then there's um, other issues with the ADD is an executive function disorder. So it's not just with attention, it's with kind of logic, critical thinking, planning, time management, time and space, like kind of linear thinking. There can be a lot of challenges there. And everybody, of course, these symptoms manifest differently in everybody. Um, and and they're on a range between, like, mild to severe. So it can, children, especially children, handle things um, in the best way that they can at the time, because children are powerless. So if they're growing up with an abusive parent or a very um, kind of traumatic house. Let's say there's active addiction, there's neglect, there's abuse, there's that level of unpredictability, all of that level of uneasiness, that level of scatteredness, all of that can be a response to that. So, um, because children don't have the vocabulary either to often describe what's going on, then they don't have the power. So even if they can describe what's going on, they're still at kind of the mercy of the system. Um, they can be assertive all they want, but at the end of the day, like they really don't have a lot of control about their living situation. So, um, yeah, so that can, very anxiety inducing, and it can cause all kinds of issues. Excuse me. Behavioral, okay, behavioral issues. But let me say that with a little asterisk next to it. Behavioral issues, um, or what behaviors that we would maybe seen as behavioral issues or acting out, are often signs of trauma. So, and it's going to depend on the child's age. There's lots of different things. Same with adults, are going to handle things differently. So, if an adult has recently been out of an abusive relationship, they're well, depending on their experience, but more often than not, they're going to feel very reactive. They're going to feel impulsive. They're going to feel hypervigilant. They might have an excessive amount of energy. Um, so there can be a lot of overlap between trauma and symptoms kind of being misinterpreted as ADD. So, but again, that's not to say that a person can't have both, because they absolutely can. It Trauma doesn't help anything, right? But especially, uh, um, well, it doesn't help anything, regardless of the diagnosis. It's You're going to see a lot of behavior that's, um, you think more often than not, a kind of scattered or maladaptive in some way, shape, or form. So it as adult, well, even as children, but as adults especially, it's not necessarily like a symptom of what you see a lot of is victims of abuse, because they're very emotional, they're very reactive, they're riding these highs and lows that can be due to trauma bonds. It's very push pull. It's I love you, I hate you, I don't know what's going on, I feel safe, I feel scared. They're just all over the place. That it tends to have a lot to do with abuse. But again, this isn't to say that there's not it might not necessarily just be this current relationship. That might be ongoing things. um, I came up with the term, I call it trauma stacking. So when the kind of traumas aren't being processed and a person continues to go through them, they stack up. And you're going to start seeing this exponential increase in all kinds of um, maladaptive behavior, but it's that person's highest and best way of handling it at the time. Um, But with adults, you see trauma oftentimes being misdiagnosed as borderline personality disorder or bipolar disorder. But really, it's that level of reactivity, that impulsiveness, that kind of erratic, dramatic, and emotional behavior. It's um, it's a kind of a very normal reaction to very abnormal situations. If you've been in a relationship with somebody who's continually pushing your buttons, they're provoking, they're baiting, they're lying, they're manipulating, that it's called crazy making for a reason. It's because it makes a person crazy. It brings out rage, it brings out, you just become very emotional because you're not being heard, you're not, and then you're only getting a bunch of nonsense. It's crazy making. And so uh, if a person is not, if a clinician's not asking the right questions uh, to kind of assess to see if there is um, like emotional, psychological, and verbal abuse there, then they're going to miss a big part of the picture as to what's going on with that person. So, okay, let me scroll up. Okay, here we go. She says, Dana, do you have any tips for rebuilding self esteem after abuse? I'm trying to get a better job and move apartments. I've had my confidence knocked down. And so now I'm in freeze mode. Hmm. Oh, gosh. Are you going to be around tomorrow? Elle, we're doing book club tomorrow because this is, make a note of this here. It's a big question and it's kind of a big answer. And I think it would help. I know it would help if I had some time, if I had some time to chew on this. Because yeah, there's quite a few things that you can do that I would recommend that you do in terms of rebuilding self-esteem. Um, but yeah, it's going to require, I think, kind of more of an extensive response. Let's see. Zamibo Jazz asked about book club. It was not, it didn't happen last week. I had a bunch of stuff just kind of come down the stream all at once. Um, Stuff in my personal life. My brother was diagnosed with COVID on Thursday. It's just been kind of one thing after another. So yeah, I apologize for the late notice. Sometimes there are times where uh, the way I cope with stress is like I feel like I have the coping methods or coping mechanisms of a fainting goat. Like I just don't handle stress very well, and then it just completely overwhelms me. So I apologize when I can't be there when I want to be there. Oh gosh. So book club will be tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay, Elle says that she's going to be there too. I will open book club with a discussion, and then I think it'll be a good segue into the book, The Four Agreements, because um, there's the book is just little nuggets of wisdom. It's so it's so simple. It's one of those things. It's like Texas Hold'em, if you've ever played poker. It kind of the whole saying, like, it takes a moment to learn, but a lifetime to master. This book is the same way. It's a little book. It's very, on the surface, it's very simplistic. And you kind of finish it and you're like, oh, okay. But then if the more you think about it and you really let those messages absorb, it's it's very life changing. So, and I think a lot of it does pertain to those four agreements really do pertain to self-esteem. And um, yeah, I think that would be a good conversation to have. Yeah, people are saying, Dana, I hope your brother's okay. Yeah, I do too. I just have it's a mix of emotions. He has fibromyalgia, and he also uh, wasn't taking COVID as seriously as he needed to. And so, part of me is upset with him, and part of me is really, really worried about him because he tends to just have very somatic symptoms of everything. And he's really struggling big time with body aches and having trouble sleeping and just all kinds of stuff. His girlfriend has it too. And I don't know. I, I worry. I worry a lot. And yeah, but thank you. Um, AB says, I still cannot say the affirmation that I am lovable with confidence. That those affirmations, the ones that we struggle with, that where there's that resistance there, sometimes certain affirmations take some time. Um, One of the things that you can do is asking yourself, how true does that statement feel? So, because this is a way you can kind of see your progress. So, let's say when you started that affirmation of I am lovable on a scale of 1 to 7, 7 being absolutely true, 1 being not true at all, where were you feeling? What number would you give that affirmation as far as level of truth for you whenever you started it, like a week or two ago? So, 7 being absolutely true, 1 being not at all. And then think about, okay, where are you today? How true does that feel now? And then you can also get some added clarity around that. So let's say, for example, 2 weeks ago, you were like, that felt like a 1.5, really did not feel true at all. Okay, so that's your starting place. And you might have a whole bunch of reasons as to why you didn't feel lovable. And sometimes it can help to list those out. Okay, why doesn't that feel true to you? Why does it feel like a 1.5? And then thinking, okay, well, now today, what does it feel like? Does that statement feel like, let's say it feels like a 4? Okay, what, um, kind of why did you give it a 4? Why not a 5 and why not a 3? And getting clarity around that can be helpful in terms of seeing some of that resistance more clearly. What are some of those blocks there? Okay. Okay, interesting. So AB says, before, when she first started, she would say it was at a 3, but today she's at a 2. Okay, so it went down. So, but I would say it's going with that same process of, okay, when you first started, why did you give it the number 3? What does the 3 look like for you? And today, and then the same thing. Okay, so why 2? Why is it? And this is coming from and asking yourself from a place of curiosity, not judgment. So there's no like, well, why? You know, like, well, why is it a 3? There's no judgment, there's no aggressiveness intended there. So kind of getting curious. Okay, well, that's interesting. Why did I give that a 3? And why do I think now is it a 2? That can open up that can open up a lot to kind of explore that. And what maybe even asking yourself, well, what do you think would need to happen in order for that to get that number back up to a 3? Or what do you think would need to happen to get that number up to a 4? Ah, okay. Okay. That's very clarity giving here. AB says, okay, somebody canceled on a date with me tonight. Okay. So it was situational based. So what we can learn from that was that your feelings of lovability was coming from outside of yourself. And this is a very um, something that I think a lot of people struggle with. So when we're having that's our lovability being dictated, especially, oh my gosh, with dating and rejection, and that's a whole, I mean, that's a roller coaster. That's a very difficult way to live. So what I would recommend with that is really making that conscious or concerted effort to realize that your lovability exists. It exists all the time, and it exists regardless of whether or not other people see it. And to really hold on to that, it is so important, because if our lovability, if we're putting our lovability, our self-worth into the hands of other people, then it's going to, we don't know, right? And we don't know, we're hope, well, then we're relying on hope. I hope that this person treats me with dignity and respect. I hope that they um, I hope that they love me, right? I hope that they treat me with all of the care and compassion that I need. That's a very difficult way to be, because if they don't, and even if they're the most amazing person, and that they're trying their best, there's still going to be times that they fall short. So, and so it's important that our lovability isn't so tied up into their behavior that it's outside of that we're able to keep to keep these things in two separate buckets, to keep our hurt feelings and our self-worth or our lovability in two different buckets. So absolutely, you got stood up, or somebody ghosted you or what have. Yeah, ouch, that hurts. That hurts, and it's hard. There's a part of us that of course is going to be like, oh man, I'm really disappointed. I thought this person was uh, I thought this had some potential. I enjoyed their company, or um, I just didn't see that coming, or what's wrong with me, right? Like, oh, and it's easy to kind of go into that spiral, and to think that that's some sort of reflection that we're somehow not good enough. But it doesn't have to mean all of that. That's the story that we're creating around that event. So yeah, absolutely. Your feelings are hurt, and that's okay. You feel how you feel, but it doesn't have to spill over into your lovability bucket or your self-worth bucket. It doesn't have to all of that toxic, kind of that negativity and that feelings of rejection and not good enough. It doesn't have to diminish that other bucket. So these two things buckets can and ideally will exist independently of each other, because we're going, life is full, unfortunately life is full of rejection. It's full of um, it's a mixed bag of the people that we come across, and not everybody's going to like us, not everybody's going to want to be our friend, not everybody's going to want to date us. um, and and that's hard. We're not going to get hired at every job we apply for. um, there's all kinds of these rejections throughout our life, but that we don't have to let that negatively impact our self-worth. So maybe kind of taking some time and sorting out and realizing, okay, I've got some hurt feelings, but I can have my hurt feelings just be my hurt feelings. And that all of those things that I felt were lovable about me before. Well, and I guess the other question is, when you gave yourself a 3, was that due to external uh, sources? Did somebody ask you out that day? Like, what influenced the number 3? But let's just say, um, let's say that that 3 was, there wasn't, that you weren't on these highs and lows of, oh yay, I just got a new job, or oh no, somebody, I just got fired from my job, or oh yay, I got a date, or oh no, they didn't show up. That kind of stuff aside, kind of. in your heart of hearts, if you were giving yourself that 3, was it based on things that was inside of yourself? So if that's the case, then maybe waiting a few days and then checking in with yourself again of, okay, where is my lovability now? Now that the hurt has kind of subsided. Okay. Um, yeah. Well, I hope that you guys have kind of given me some ideas for a little bit of a different direction for book club tomorrow night. So we're going to tie book club into self-esteem and self-love. um, Tomorrow. Let me just make some notes. Okay. Let's see. We are getting towards the end of our time tonight. So I know that there's some people here that want to do kind of that grounding meditation. So let's do that. Let's spend some time doing that. And I will see you guys tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for book club. If you would like to be notified of when I go live, you can text the words Dana Live, all one word, to the number 22999 and receive a text message. So, with that said, let's take some time to settle in and get comfortable in finding a place where, oh gosh, where you can just be still. If that's lying down or in a chair, taking some time where you can be here in this present moment. Taking a deep breath in and a deep exhale out. And with each breath, allowing your chest to easily and effortlessly rise and fall. Feeling each breath travel down deep into the bases of your lungs, deep into your stomach, feeling your whole torso rise and fall with each breath. And with each breath, allowing your body to be heavy, releasing any tension or stress, allowing yourself to sink into a chair or to a bed, feeling the heaviness of your body as each of your muscles relax. And now bringing your attention to the temperature of the room or the space around you, and noticing how it feels. Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it warm? Does it feel comfortable for you? Or does it feel uncomfortable for you? Noticing the fabric next to your skin. Is it thin or is it thick? Is it soft or is it scratchy? And now turning your attention inward until you can feel your heartbeat. And realizing that there are so many things that your body does on a daily basis to kind of keep you going. And that there's trillions, trillions of cells in your body, and they're all working towards your highest and best good. And that there's this whole inner world inside of us. And just how amazing. That's so amazing. Taking some time to just be grateful. Be grateful for everything that is good and right in your life at this time. That spring is almost here. That having gratitude for all of the things that our body does every single moment of every single day. That's amazing. Taking time to be grateful, gosh, for clean hot water. What a gift. Or for having a roof over your head, or the money that you do have, and the health that you do have. And taking some time to acknowledge and to be grateful for all of the things that make you you, for all of your strengths. And that there are so many things, there are so many strengths that you do have. You're resilient, you're strong, you're dedicated to personal growth, you're introspective, you're curious, you're motivated in many ways. So many things about you that are good and right. And thinking about the ways that you are creative or compassionate. And realizing that you are absolutely worthy of being treated with dignity and respect and care and compassion. That you are lovable, that there are so many things that are good and right about you. And to hold on to that and to realize that we don't need anybody else to agree with that. That you are lovable and you are worthy of being treated with dignity and respect. It's not something that you need to earn. It's just something that you get just for being here, just for being on this planet. So maybe taking the time to visualize giving yourself a really big energetic hug and looking yourself in the eyes and just acknowledging that you are lovable and that there is so much that is good and right with you. And that at the end of the day, that you love you. And when you're ready, come on back and open your eyes. So, okay, with that said, thank you guys so much for being here tonight. Thank you for supporting each other and uh, yeah, for all of your questions, for everything. Thank you, Mod Squad, for all that you do. You are beyond appreciated. And uh, yeah, I hope to see you guys tomorrow night for book club, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be discussing the book, The Four Agreements. And so if you'd like to sign up for when I go live, you can text the words Dana live to the number 22999 and get a notification. So with that said, as always, you are not alone. You are not crazy and you can move forward and heal from this. So take care and just lots of love to you guys.